Princess Izar of Krenim couldn't tear her eyes away from the sight of Timothy Hall tearing into a juicy steak. The human's sharp canines glinted as he savored each bite, oblivious to the alien royalty's fascination. Izar's antenna twitched, a mix of revulsion and intrigue coursing through her chlorophyll-rich veins. Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance hung by a thread, with the herbivorous Krenim holding significant sway over the decision. The cultural exchange program was meant to foster understanding between the two species, but it was quickly becoming a source of tension. Ambassador Zorn paced in his quarters aboard the Krenim ship, anxiety radiating from his slender frame. He had just received reports of Princess Izar's growing interest in human dietary habits, particularly those of the rugged marine biologist assigned as her guide. Timothy Hall stood at the helm of his research vessel, salt spray misting his tan skin as he scanned the horizon for signs of predatory sea life. He was unaware of the political storm brewing around him, focused solely on showcasing Earth's marine wonders to the alien visitor. The princess's request for a private dinner loomed in his mind, a mix of excitement and apprehension churning in his gut. Back on the Krenim ship, officials scrambled to implement stricter monitoring protocols. Holographic displays flickered with data streams, tracking Princess Izar's every move on Earth. Ambassador Zorn's fingers hovered over the communication panel, contemplating whether to cut the exchange short and potentially doom Earth's chances of joining the Alliance. On the planet's surface, Izar found herself drawn to Timothy's physicality in a way she'd never experienced before. Her specialized sensory organs detected the subtle changes in his body chemistry, the primal energy that seemed to radiate from him. It both frightened and thrilled her, challenging everything she'd been taught about the superiority of herbivorous species. As Timothy prepared for their upcoming dinner, he grappled with the weight of his role in Earth's diplomatic efforts. He knew he had to tread carefully, balancing his growing attraction to the alien princess with the need to represent humanity in the best light possible. The consequences of his actions could reshape the future of interstellar relations. Princess Izar, sequestered in her temporary Earth quarters, pored over data files on human biology. Her curiosity about their digestive systems and mating habits bordered on obsession. She formulated questions for Timothy, each more probing than the last, determined to understand the enigma of human carnivorous behavior. As the sun set over the ocean, casting a fiery glow across the waves, both Timothy and Izar prepared for the dinner that would change everything. The stage was set for a clash of cultures, a test of diplomatic skills, and an exploration of interspecies attraction that neither of them could have anticipated. The fate of Earth's place in the galactic community hung in the balance, all hinging on a single meal between a human marine biologist and an alien princess who couldn't resist the allure of the carnivorous. The beachfront restaurant glowed softly in the twilight, its windows reflecting the last remnants of the setting sun. Timothy Hall stood at the entrance, his eyes scanning the perimeter. He noted the increased security presence, both human and Krenim guards positioned strategically around the building. The sight made him swallow hard, the weight of his responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Princess Izar approached, her iridescent skin shimmering in the fading light. Timothy offered a small bow, then gestured towards the door. "Your Highness, shall we?" As they entered, the emptiness of the restaurant struck them both. The usual buzz of conversation and clinking cutlery was replaced by an eerie silence. Their footsteps echoed on the polished floor as a waiter led them to a secluded table overlooking the ocean. Timothy pulled out Izar's chair, careful not to touch her. As they settled, he couldn't help but notice the princess's antenna twitching nervously. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. "I hope this setting is acceptable," Timothy said, his voice low. "I thought you might appreciate the view of the ocean." Izar nodded, her gaze fixed on the menu. "It's adequate," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. When the waiter returned, Timothy ordered confidently, "I'll have the seafood platter, please." He turned to Izar, who seemed to be struggling with her choice. "And for the princess?" Izar hesitated, her antenna quivering. I will have the vegetarian option," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. As they waited for their food, an awkward silence descended. Timothy cleared his throat, searching for a safe topic of conversation. So, Your Highness, what do you think of Earth's oceans compared to those on your home planet? Izar's eyes lit up, her discomfort momentarily forgotten. They're fascinating. The biodiversity is unlike anything we have on Crenum. I've been particularly intrigued by your cetaceans. Their conversation flowed more easily after that, touching on various aspects of marine biology. Timothy found himself impressed by Izar's knowledge and genuine curiosity. The arrival of their food brought a sudden tension back to the table. Timothy's plate was a colorful array of various seafood, while Izar's held a delicate arrangement of local vegetables and fruits. As Timothy began to eat, he noticed Izar watching him intently. Her antennae were fully extended, quivering slightly. He paused, a forkful of fish halfway to his mouth. "Is everything all right, Your Highness?" Izar's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of green. I'm curious," she admitted. "Could you explain the process of consuming meat?" Timothy set down his fork, considering his words carefully. "Of course. Well, first we use our teeth to break down the food into smaller pieces." He demonstrated taking a small bite of fish. "Then we chew it, mixing it with saliva to begin the digestive process." Izar leaned forward, her eyes wide. "And the taste? What is it like?" "It's hard to describe," Timothy said thoughtfully. "This fish, for example, has a delicate flavor. It's slightly salty with a hint of sweetness. The texture is flaky and tender." As he continued his explanation, Timothy noticed Izar's expression shifting from disgust to fascination. Her antennae were now fully extended, vibrating with intensity. "Would you—" Izar hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Would you allow me to taste a small piece?" Timothy blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to offend you or violate any cultural taboos." Izar shook her head. "I am here to learn about human culture. This is part of that process." With great care, Timothy selected a small morsel of fish and placed it on Izar's plate. The princess stared at it for a long moment, her breath quickening. Then, with a determined set to her jaw, she picked it up and placed it in her mouth. The reaction was immediate. Izar's eyes widened, her antennae going rigid. She chewed slowly, her expression a mix of shock and wonder. Before she could swallow, the restaurant door burst open. Ambassador Zorn stormed in, flanked by Crenum security. His face was contorted with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" he bellowed. "Princess Izar, step away from that! That barbarian immediately!" Timothy stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ambassador, please. This is a simple cultural exchange." "Silence, human!" Zorn spat. He turned to Izar, who was still frozen in shock. "Princess, you are coming with me. This farce of a diplomatic mission is over." Izar finally found her voice. "No, Ambassador, I will not leave. I have every right to explore human culture, including their dietary habits." Zorn's face darkened. He motioned to his guards. "Seize her. We're leaving this primitive planet immediately." As the guards moved forward, Timothy instinctively stepped between them and Izar. "You can't do this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "The princess is here as our guest. She has diplomatic immunity." Zorn lunged forward, reaching for Izar's arm. In a fluid motion, Timothy deflected the ambassador's hand and maneuvered Izar behind him. The Crenum guards hesitated, clearly unprepared for physical confrontation. The standoff was broken by the arrival of Marcus Steele, Earth's chief diplomat. He swept into the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Ambassador Zorn," he said smoothly, "surely we can tenacity this situation without resorting to force." As Steele began to negotiate, Timothy noticed Izar swaying slightly. Her skin had taken on a sickly pallor, and her antennae drooped. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "are you feeling all right?" Izar's eyes met his, unfocused and glassy. "I feel strange," she murmured. Then, without warning, she collapsed. Timothy caught her before she hit the ground, his mind racing. Drawing on his biological knowledge, he quickly assessed her condition. "It's the protein," he announced. "Her herbivore physiology can't process it. We need a xenobiologist now." The room erupted into chaos. Zorn was shouting accusations. Steele was calling for medical assistance, and the guards were struggling to maintain order. Through it all, Timothy cradled Izar's unconscious form, his eyes never leaving her face. As Dr. Elena Rodriguez rushed into the restaurant, her medical kit at the ready, Timothy knew that the consequences of this dinner would reach far beyond anything he could have imagined. The fate of Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance now hung in the balance, all because of a simple piece of fish. The chaos in the restaurant subsided as Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked swiftly to stabilize Princess Izar. Timothy watched anxiously as the xenobiologist administered a series of injections and ran scans with her advanced medical equipment. "She's responding well," Dr. Rodriguez announced after several tense minutes. "The protein breakdown caused a severe allergic reaction, but we've managed to neutralize it." Ambassador Zorn hovered nearby, his face a mask of concern and scarcely controlled fury. "This is precisely why we should never have allowed this experiment," he spat. Marcus Steele stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room. "Ambassador, perhaps we can view this incident as an opportunity rather than a setback." Zorn's antenna twitched in irritation. "An opportunity? Your human's recklessness nearly killed our princess." "And yet," Steele continued smoothly, "it has also provided us with valuable data about the physiological differences between our species. Data that could be crucial for future interactions." As if on cue, Princess Izar's eyes fluttered open. She looked around, disoriented, before her gaze settled on Timothy. "What happened?" Timothy knelt beside her, careful not to touch her. "You had an adverse reaction to the fish, Your Highness. Dr. Rodriguez was able to treat you." Izar's antenna quivered with excitement despite her weakened state. "Fascinating," she murmured. "The effects were intense." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. "Princess, with your permission, I'd like to run some more comprehensive tests. This incident could provide invaluable insights into Krenim physiology." Before Zorn could object, Izar nodded eagerly. "Yes, of course. I volunteer myself for further study." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The cultural exchange program was temporarily suspended as both human and Krenim authorities debated the implications of the dinner incident. Timothy found himself thrust into the center of a diplomatic storm, fielding questions from both sides about his actions and observations. A week after the incident, Timothy was summoned to a high-level meeting at the Earth's diplomatic headquarters. He entered the sleek conference room to find Marcus Steele, Dr. Rodriguez, Ambassador Zorn, and a stern-looking Krenim he didn't recognize. Steele gestured for Timothy to take a seat. "Mr. Hall, thank you for joining us. Allow me to introduce Dr. Vex, the lead Krenim biologist who will be overseeing their side of our new joint research initiative." Timothy's eyebrows shot up. "Joint research initiative?" Dr. Rodriguez nodded, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "The incident with Princess Izar has sparked intense scientific interest. We've been given approval to launch a comprehensive study of human and Krenim physiological differences. And I suppose you expect me to allow Izar to participate in this study?" Zorn's voice dripped with disdain. Steele leaned forward, his voice low and persuasive. "Ambassador, think of the potential benefits. This research could bridge the gap between our species, paving the way for Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance." Zorn's antenna twitched indecisively. Dr. Vex spoke up, his voice a gravelly rumble. "I must concur with the humans, Ambassador. The preliminary data from the incident is intriguing. It suggests possibilities we had never considered." After a long moment, Zorn nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but I insist on strict protocols for the princess's safety." The meeting continued late into the night as they hammered out the details of the research project. Timothy found his head spinning with the implications. As a marine biologist, he never imagined he'd be at the forefront of interstellar diplomacy. 2 weeks later, Timothy stood on the beach outside the newly constructed research facility. The sleek building gleamed in the morning sun, a perfect blend of human and Krenim architecture. Waves lapped at the shore, a soothing counterpoint to the nervous energy thrumming through his body. He turned as he heard footsteps approaching. Princess Izar walked towards him, her iridescent skin shimmering in the sunlight. Behind her, a tall, muscular crenum female followed closely, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. "Your Highness," Timothy said, bowing slightly, "I hope you're feeling better." Izar's antenna twitched in what Timothy had come to recognize as a smile. "Much better, thank you. The effects of the protein have fully dissipated. I'm eager to begin our research." The crenum guard cleared her throat pointedly. Izar sighed. "Forgive me. Timothy, this is Kira, my new chaperone." Timothy nodded to Kira, who returned the gesture stiffly. He could feel the tension radiating from her. "Shall we head inside? Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Vex are waiting to begin the first round of tests." As they walked towards the facility, Izar moved closer to Timothy. "I must admit," she said quietly, "I'm most curious about the aspects of human biology related to your carnivorous nature. The intensity of the experience. It was unlike anything I've ever felt." Timothy swallowed hard, acutely aware of Kira's watchful gaze. "We'll certainly be exploring that, Your Highness, but we'll need to proceed with caution." Izar's antenna quivered with impossibly strong excitement. "Of course, but I hope we'll have time to discuss human culture more thoroughly. There's so much I want to learn, especially about your mating habits." Timothy nearly tripped over his own feet. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks as Kira's eyes bored into his back. As they entered the facility, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. The research was only beginning, and already he could feel the delicate balance of diplomacy, science, and personal feelings threatening to tip. The automatic doors slid shut behind them, sealing them into the climate-controlled environment of the research center. As they made their way to the main laboratory, Timothy couldn't shake the feeling that they were embarking on a journey that would change not just their own lives, but the future of human-crenum relations forever. The research facility buzzed with activity as the team made final preparations for their deep-sea expedition. Timothy stood before the sleek submersible, marveling at its advanced design. The vessel gleamed under the harsh lights of the hangar, a testament to the combined technological prowess of humans and crenum. "Impressive, isn't it?" Dr. Rodriguez said, joining Timothy. "This beauty can take us deeper than any human vessel has gone before." Timothy nodded, his excitement palpable. "It's incredible. I never thought I'd be part of something like this." As they discussed the final checklist, Princess Izar approached, accompanied by Dr. Vex and her ever-present chaperone, Kira. The princess's antenna quivered with terrifying enthusiasm. "Are we ready to embark on our journey?" Izar asked, her eyes shining. Timothy couldn't help but smile at her eagerness. "Almost, Your Highness. We're just running through the final safety protocols." Dr. Vex cleared his throat, his gravelly voice echoing in the hangar. "I must emphasize the importance of caution. We are venturing into unknown territory." The team boarded the submersible, a mix of human and crenum scientists filing into the cramped quarters. As the hatch sealed shut, Timothy felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. This was it. They were about to make history. The descent began smoothly, the darkness of the ocean engulfing them as they sank deeper. Through the viewports, bioluminescent creatures drifted by, their ethereal glow casting dancing shadows inside the submersible. Izar pressed her face against the glass, her antenna vibrating with excitement. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Suddenly, the submersible lurched to the side. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, and a high-pitched alarm filled the air. "What's happening?" Dr. Rodriguez shouted over the noise. Timothy's hands flew over the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The navigation system is malfunctioning. We're veering off course." Dr. Vex's antenna flattened against his head. "Can you correct it?" Timothy shook his head. "The automated systems are completely offline. I'll have to navigate manually." As panic began to spread among the crew, Timothy took a deep breath. He focused on the screen, searching for familiar underwater landmarks. Years of studying marine environments had prepared him for this moment. "There," he said, pointing to a distinctive rock formation. "We can use that as a reference point." With steady hands, Timothy guided the submersible back on course. The tension in the cabin slowly dissipated as they resumed their descent. Dr. Rodriguez patted Timothy on the shoulder. "Quick thinking, Hall. You just saved the mission." Izar's eyes were wide with admiration. "That was incredible, Timothy. How did you know what to do?" Before Timothy could respond, the submersible began to shake violently. Outside the viewports, powerful currents swirled, carrying debris and marine life in a chaotic dance. "Underwater storm," Dr. Vex shouted. "We need to stabilize the vessel." Timothy gripped the controls, fighting against the turbulent waters. "I need help managing the stabilizers." Without hesitation, Izar moved to his side. "Tell me what to do." Together, they worked in perfect synchronization. Timothy called out instructions, and Izar responded with lightning-fast reflexes. The rest of the crew watched in awe as the human and Krenim pair navigated the treacherous currents. As the storm subsided, a collective sigh of relief filled the cabin. Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Vex exchanged glances, both clearly impressed by the display of cooperation. "We're approaching the target area," Timothy announced, his voice steady despite the lingering adrenaline. The team crowded around the viewports, eager for their first glimpse of the newly discovered species. As they neared the sea floor, strange structures came into view, organic formations unlike anything they had seen before. "Deploy the collection equipment," Dr. Vex ordered, his scientific curiosity overriding his earlier caution. As the team worked to gather data and images, Dr. Rodriguez gasped. "Look at this," she said, gesturing to a holographic display. "The creature's digestive system. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Dr. Vex leaned in, his antenna twitching with interest. "It appears to be capable of processing both plant matter and animal protein with equal efficiency." The implications of this discovery hung heavy in the air. Izar's antenna quivered as she turned to Timothy. Could Krenim potentially adapt to a diet similar to humans? Before Timothy could answer, a loud bang echoed through the submersible. Warning lights flashed once again, and a computerized voice announced, "Hull integrity compromised. External inspection required." Timothy's heart raced as he realized what needed to be done. "I'll have to go out and repair it," he said, moving towards the airlock. Izar stepped forward, her posture determined. "I'm coming with you." Kira, who had remained silent until now, grabbed Izar's arm. "Absolutely not, Your Highness. It's too dangerous." But Izar pulled away, her eyes locked on Timothy. "I can help. We've already proven how well we work together." Despite the protests of the others, Izar donned a specialized suit alongside Timothy. As they prepared to exit the submersible, Timothy couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and concern for the princess's bravery. The airlock hissed open, and they emerged into the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. Timothy immediately spotted the damaged section and began the repairs. Izar hovered nearby, passing him tools and keeping watch. Suddenly, a movement caught Timothy's eye. A group of sleek, predatory creatures emerged from the gloom, their eyes fixed on the two vulnerable figures outside the submersible. "Izar, behind you!" Timothy shouted through the comm link. The princess spun around, her eyes widening at the approaching danger. Without hesitation, she activated a device on her suit, emitting a pulse of energy that momentarily disoriented the predators. Timothy quickly finished the repair and grabbed Izar's hand. "Back to the airlock, now!" As they swam, the predators regrouped and charged. Timothy and Izar worked in tandem, using a combination of human defensive maneuvers and Krenim technology to fend off the attacks. They reached the airlock just as one of the creatures made a final lunge. Its razor-sharp teeth grazed Izar's suit, tearing through the material. Alarms blared as the pressure difference threatened to crush her. Timothy acted on instinct, pulling Izar into the airlock and sealing it shut. As the chamber pressurized, he could see the pain etched on Izar's face. The moment the inner door opened, Timothy scooped her up and carried her to the medical bay. "Dr. Rodriguez," he called out, "Izar's been injured." As the xenobiologist rushed to treat the princess, Timothy found himself holding Izar's hand, his heart pounding with fear and something else, an emotion he wasn't quite ready to name. The submersible hummed around them, the rich bounty of their discoveries temporarily forgotten, as the team rallied around their injured comrade. Outside, in the vast darkness of the ocean depths, the mysterious bioluminescent glow they had observed earlier began to intensify, heralding new wonders and perhaps new dangers yet to come. Be revealed. The bioluminescent glow intensified, bathing the submersible in an ethereal light. Timothy's eyes widened as a massive shape emerged from the darkness. A colossal cephalopod-like creature, easily dwarfing their vessel, appeared before them. "My God," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, her face pressed against the viewport. "It's incredible." The creature's tentacles undulated gracefully, creating intricate patterns of light across its body. Dr. Vex leaned forward, his antenna twitching with excitement. "It's trying to communicate," he said, his gravelly voice filled with awe. Timothy watched in fascination as the creature's lights pulsed and shifted. "Dr. Rodriguez, are you seeing this? The patterns, they're not random." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, her fingers flying across a holographic interface. "I'm recording everything. We need to analyze these light sequences." As the team worked to decipher the creature's signals, Timothy noticed something peculiar about its behavior. "Look at how it's interacting with the environment," he said, pointing to where the creature's tentacles were exploring both rocky outcroppings and patches of vegetation. Dr. Vex moved closer, his eyes narrowing. "It appears to be feeding, but not exclusively on one type of matter. Just like the smaller species we came to study," Izar chimed in, her voice weak but filled with excitement. She had insisted on joining the others in the control room, despite Dr. Rodriguez's protests. Timothy turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Your Highness, you should be resting." Izar waved away his concern, her eyes fixed on the creature outside. "This is too important. Do you realize what this means? If this creature can process both plant and animal matter, it could have significant implications for Crenum biology," Dr. Vex finished, his antenna quivering. The intelligent sea creature began to move, its tentacles gesturing in what seemed to be an invitation. Slowly, it started to guide the submersible deeper into the ocean. "It wants us to follow," Timothy said, his hands hovering over the controls. Dr. Rodriguez looked uncertain. "Is it safe?" "We came here to explore," Izar said, her voice firm. "We must trust in the spirit of discovery." Timothy nodded, carefully maneuvering the submersible to follow the creature's lead. As they descended, the ocean floor gave way to a vast network of underwater caverns. The bioluminescent creature led them through twisting passages, revealing an ecosystem teeming with life unlike anything they had ever seen. "These species," Dr. Vex muttered, his eyes darting from one creature to another. "They defy classification. Look at the way they're adapted to both carnivorous and herbivorous lifestyles." Timothy's expertise came into play as he navigated the treacherous terrain, avoiding jagged outcroppings and swift currents. Izar watched him work, her admiration growing with each deft maneuver. Suddenly, the cavern shook violently. Warning alarms blared as the submersible was tossed about by the underwater tremor. "Hull integrity compromised," the computer's voice announced. Timothy gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control. "We need to surface now!" He spotted an air pocket in the cavern above them and guided the damaged submersible toward it. With a sickening crunch, they breached the surface, the submersible listing to one side. "Everyone okay?" Timothy called out, unbuckling his harness. A chorus of affirmatives responded, though Dr. Rodriguez was nursing a bruised arm. Timothy quickly assessed the situation. "We need to make repairs before we can leave this air pocket." As the team set about the task of repairing the submersible, Izar found herself drawn to Timothy. She watched the way his muscles tensed and relaxed as he worked, fascinated by the efficiency of his movements. "Dr. Rodriguez," Izar said quietly, moving closer to the human scientist. "I was wondering, could you tell me more about human physiology, specifically how your bodies respond to stress and physical exertion?" Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Of course, Your Highness. What would you like to know?" As Dr. Rodriguez explained the basics of human biology, Izar's questions became increasingly focused on reproduction and mating behaviors. the xenobiologist found herself giving an impromptu lesson on human sexual dimorphism and courtship rituals. Meanwhile, Timothy and the Crenum engineers worked tirelessly on the repairs. The close quarters and shared danger heightened emotions among the crew. Izar felt a strange warmth spreading through her body whenever she looked at Timothy, her antenna quivering with unfamiliar sensations. Dr. Vex noticed the change in Izar's behavior, his own antenna flattening with concern. He approached her cautiously. "Your Highness, are you feeling all right? Your pheromone production seems elevated." Izar blinked, suddenly aware of the intensity of her feelings. I'm fine, Dr. Vex, just excited about our discoveries." As the repairs neared completion, Timothy noticed something strange on the cavern walls. "Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Vex, you need to see this." The team gathered around, staring in disbelief at the ancient markings etched into the rock. The symbols seemed to depict both human and Crenum figures, suggesting a long-lost connection between their worlds. "This is impossible," Dr. Vex muttered, his antenna twitching rapidly. Izar's eyes met Timothy's, a spark of understanding passing between them. The implications of this discovery were staggering, hinting at a shared history that neither of their species had known about. As the submersible hummed back to life, the team prepared to ascend with their groundbreaking findings. However, a familiar bioluminescent glow outside the viewport caught their attention. The intelligent sea creature had returned, its tentacles gesturing urgently. "It wants to come with us," Timothy realized, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Dr. Rodriguez shook her head. "We can't just bring an unknown species to the surface. The diplomatic implications alone—" "We have to," Izar interrupted, her voice firm. "This creature is intelligent. We have a responsibility to facilitate this contact." As the submersible began its ascent, the atmosphere inside was charged with tension and anticipation. Timothy found himself stealing glances at Izar, his professional detachment crumbling in the face of their shared experiences. Izar, for her part, was lost in thought. The discoveries they had made challenged everything she thought she knew about her species and their place in the universe. And then there was Timothy. She felt an overwhelming urge to explore these new feelings, to understand the connection that seemed to be growing between them. As they rose through the water column, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them, Izar made a decision. She would conduct her own experiment, one that would explore the boundaries between their species in a very personal way. With tenacity in her eyes, she approached Timothy, her antenna quivering with nervous energy. "Timothy," she said softly, "I was hoping we could speak privately once we return to the surface. There's something I'd like to investigate." Timothy looked at her, surprise and a hint of something else flickering in his eyes. "Of course, Your Highness. I'm at your disposal." As the surface drew nearer, the team braced themselves for the reception that awaited them. Their mission had taken an unexpected turn, and the consequences of their discoveries were yet to be determined. But for Izar and Timothy, a new journey was just beginning, one that would test the limits of their understanding, their duty, and their hearts. As the submersible breached the surface, the team's elation was tempered by the realization that their bioluminescent guide had followed them up from the depths. Timothy's mind raced, drawing on his years of marine biology experience. "We need to guide it away from populated areas," he said, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. Izar's antenna twitched with interest. "What do you propose, Timothy?" He outlined a plan to use a combination of light and sound signals to communicate with the creature, directing it to safer waters. Izar's eyes lit up. "Brilliant. I'll assist you." As they worked together to implement Timothy's plan, Izar found herself marveling at his quick thinking and adaptability. Their fingers brushed as they adjusted the equipment, sending a shiver through her body. The submersible's hatch opened, revealing a flotilla of human and Crenum vessels surrounding them. On the nearest ship's deck stood Ambassador Zorn and Council member Draz, their faces a mix of concern and curiosity. Beside them was Marcus Steele, Earth's diplomat, his eyebrows raised at the sight of the massive sea creature breaching the surface. Panic erupted among the crews as the creature's tentacles rose from the water. Timothy and Izar sprang into action, working in tandem to project a series of light patterns and low-frequency sounds towards the being. "Look," Dr. Rodriguez gasped, pointing at the creature. Its bioluminescent patches pulsed in response, mimicking the patterns Timothy and Izar had created. Slowly, gracefully, the creature began to move away from the ships, its tentacles creating gentle ripples in the water. The assembled officials watched in awe as the human and Krenim princess guided the massive being to safer waters. As the immediate crisis subsided, attention turned to the research team. Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Vex stepped forward, their faces flushed with excitement. "Ambassadors, council member," Dr. Rodriguez began, "we've made an extraordinary discovery." She activated a holographic display showing images of the hybrid species they'd encountered in the underwater caverns. Dr. Vex's antenna quivered as he spoke. "Our preliminary analysis suggests these creatures share genetic markers with both humans and Krenim. The implications are significant." A hush fell over the assembled officials. Council member Draz's face darkened. "This is preposterous," he snarled, reaching for the data pad in Dr. Rodriguez's hands. "We must suppress this information immediately." Ambassador Zorn stepped between them, his voice firm. "No, Draz. This discovery could be the key to strengthening our alliance with humanity. We must pursue this research further." As the two Krenim officials argued, Izar seized the opportunity to pull Timothy aside. Her antenna quivered with nervous energy as she leaned close to him. "Timothy, I wish to conduct an experiment of my own, one that explores the physical compatibility between our species." Timothy's eyes widened, his heartbeat quickening. "Your Highness, I'm not sure that's appropriate. The diplomatic implications alone—" Their hushed conversation was interrupted by Dr. Rodriguez, who approached with a concerned expression. "Princess Izar, I've noticed your pheromone levels are significantly elevated. I must caution you about the potential biological consequences of intimate contact between humans and Krenim. We simply don't know enough about the physiological effects." Izar's antenna drooped slightly, but perseverance glinted in her eyes. "All the more reason to investigate, Doctor. Knowledge is power, after all." Before Timothy could respond, Marcus Steele's voice cut through the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have an unprecedented opportunity before us." He stepped forward, addressing both human and Krenim officials. "I propose a joint research initiative to study these new species and explore the possibility of a shared evolutionary history between our peoples." Ambassador Zorn nodded approvingly, while Council member Draz's face contorted with barely concealed disgust. The human officials murmured their agreement, excitement building among the gathered crowd. As plans for the new research project began to take shape, Izar squared her shoulders and approached the center of the deck. "Esteemed colleagues," she announced, her voice carrying across the water, "I wish to contribute to this endeavor in a unique way. I volunteer to undergo a series of controlled experiments to test the biological compatibility between humans and Krenim." A shocked silence fell over the assembled officials, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the ship's hulls. Timothy felt his face flush, acutely aware of the implications of Izar's proposal. Council member Draz sputtered in outrage, while Ambassador Zorn stroked his chin thoughtfully. Marcus Steele's eyes gleamed with the possibilities this bold move presented. "An admirable offer, Your Highness," Steele said smoothly. "Mr. Hall, as our foremost expert in xenobiology, I believe you're best suited to oversee Princess Izar's safety during these experiments." Timothy swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "Of course, Mr. Steele, I'll do my utmost to ensure the princess's well-being." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant hues, plans were made to establish a research base on a nearby island. Equipment and personnel were swiftly mobilized, the excitement of scientific discovery mingling with the undercurrent of political tension. Timothy found himself on a small boat headed for the island, Izar seated beside him. The princess's antenna quivered with anticipation as she leaned close. "I look forward to working closely with you, Timothy," she murmured, her breath warm against his ear. As they approached the shore, a familiar bioluminescent glow appeared beneath the waves. The intelligent sea creature had followed them, its massive form gliding gracefully through the water. Timothy watched it with a mix of awe and trepidation, keenly aware of the challenges that lay ahead. The creature's presence was just one of many unknowns in this new chapter of human-crenum relations. As he helped Izar onto the beach, their hands lingering together, perhaps a moment too long, Timothy knew that his life, and potentially the future of both their species, would never be the same. The island buzzed with activity as researchers from both species worked tirelessly to establish the joint human-crenum research base. Prefabricated structures rose from the sandy shore, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the lush tropical vegetation that covered much of the island's interior. Princess Izar's bold declaration about undergoing experiments to test human-crenum biological compatibility had sent shockwaves through both delegations. As she helped unload equipment from a shuttle, she caught Timothy's eye, her antenna quivering with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez approached them, her face etched with concern. "Your Highness, Mr. Hall, we need to discuss the parameters of these experiments. The potential risks are not to be taken lightly." Timothy nodded, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Agreed, Doctor. We should proceed with the utmost caution." Inside the newly constructed laboratory, Dr. Rodriguez outlined her plan. "We'll start with non-invasive measurements, vital signs, hormone levels, that sort of thing. We need to establish a baseline before we even consider more intimate interactions." Izar's antenna twitched with impatience, but she acquiesced. "Very well, Doctor. Let's begin." The first phase of experiments proved more illuminating than anyone had anticipated. As Timothy and Izar sat side by side, their arms nearly touching, Dr. Rodriguez monitored the readouts with growing fascination. "This is remarkable," she murmured, eyes fixed on the screens. "Your physiological responses are surprisingly similar. Look at these bonding hormone levels. They're almost identical." Timothy felt a warmth spreading through his chest, his heart rate increasing as he glanced at Izar. The princess met his gaze, her large eyes reflecting a similar sense of wonder. Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through their shared moment. "These results suggest a level of biological compatibility we never imagined possible. We may need to reevaluate our entire understanding of human and crenum physiology." As the days passed, the research team fell into a rhythm, their work punctuated by regular visits from their aquatic companion. Timothy stood on the beach, watching as the massive bioluminescent creature, now dubbed Nexus, breached the surface of the water. "Hello there, big guy," Timothy called out, raising a hand in greeting. Nexus responded with a series of gentle flashes, its tentacles creating intricate patterns in the water. Izar joined him, her antenna swaying in the sea breeze. "It's incredible how intelligent Nexus seems to be. Do you think it understands us?" Timothy shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. "I'm not sure, but I intend to find out. Nexus might hold the key to understanding the connection between our species." Their peaceful moment was shattered by the sudden appearance of a massive ship in the sky above. Its sleek, angular design marked it as crenum, but its size and array of weapons identified it as a battlecruiser. Panic erupted among the research team as the ship's shadow fell over the island. Ambassador Zorn rushed to the communications array, his face tight with worry. "This is Ambassador Zorn," he spoke into the microphone, his voice steady despite the tension. "Identify yourself and state your purpose." A gruff voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Admiral Vex of the crenum battlecruiser Relentless. We are here to ensure the safety of Princess Izar and terminate this ill-conceived research project." Timothy's blood ran cold as he recognized the name. He turned to Dr. Vex, who stood nearby, his antenna flattened against his head. "Admiral Vex, he's your brother, isn't he?" Dr. Vex nodded grimly. "Estranged brother. He represents everything I've fought against in our society. Rigid traditionalism, xenophobia, a refusal to embrace change." Ambassador Zorn's voice rose as he argued with the Admiral, but it was clear that diplomacy was failing. The situation was escalating rapidly, and Timothy could see Earth military vessels appearing on the horizon. Amidst the growing chaos, Dr. Rodriguez burst out of the lab, her face flushed with excitement. "We've done it! We've cracked the code of the ancient markings!" She activated a holographic display showing a complex series of genetic markers. These prove that humans and Krenim share a common ancestor. Millions of years ago, our species were one. The revelation stunned everyone into silence, even the argument with Admiral Vex momentarily forgotten as the implications of this discovery sank in. Princess Izar stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and determined. "I will not leave. This research is too important for both our species." As if in response to the mounting tensions, Nexus suddenly became agitated. The creature's bioluminescent patches began to pulse rapidly, emitting powerful bursts of light that played havoc with the electronic systems on the island and the orbiting ships. Alarms blared as equipment malfunctioned. Timothy grabbed Izar's hand, pulling her towards the research facility. "We need to get inside. Something's wrong." As they reached the building, Timothy noticed movement in the shadows. His years of fieldwork had honed his senses, and every instinct told him they were in danger. "Izar," he whispered urgently, "I think we're under attack. We need to warn the others." They crept through the darkened corridors of the research facility, the intermittent flashes from Nexus's light show creating an eerie stroboscopic effect. Timothy's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan to keep Izar safe and alert the rest of the team. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of heavily armed Krenim soldiers. At their head stood a tall, imposing figure that could only be Admiral Vex. The Admiral's eyes widened as he took in the sight of Princess Izar. "By the ancestors," he breathed, his antenna twitching in shock. "What have they done to you?" Izar stood tall, her body subtly different from when she had first arrived on Earth. The experiments had changed her in ways that were only now becoming apparent. Timothy stepped in front of her protectively, his heart pounding. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and he knew that the next few moments would determine the course of human-Krenim relations for generations to come. Timothy's heart raced as he stood protectively in front of Izar, his eyes locked on Admiral Vex's imposing figure. The tension in the air was palpable, crackling like electricity as the two sides faced off in the dimly lit corridor. Admiral Vex's antenna twitched with almost unchecked rage. "Step aside, human! The princess is coming with us!" Before Timothy could respond, a deafening rumble shook the facility. The walls vibrated, and a blinding light flooded through the windows. Nexus had emerged from the depths, its massive form casting an otherworldly glow over the scene. The creature's bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly, creating a dazzling display that momentarily disoriented everyone present. Timothy seized the opportunity, grabbing Izar's hand and pulling her towards a hidden access panel. "This way!" he shouted over the commotion, his fingers flying over the keypad. As they sprinted down a narrow stairwell, Izar suddenly stumbled, her body racked with violent tremors. Timothy caught her before she fell, alarm spreading through him as he felt her skin burning hot beneath his touch. "Izar, what's wrong?" he asked, supporting her weight as they continued their descent. The princess's eyes were wide with a mix of pain and wonder. I don't know. Something's happening to me, Timothy. I can feel it." They burst into the underground laboratory where Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Vex were huddled over a bank of monitors. Both scientists looked up in surprise as Timothy helped Izar onto an examination table. "Her transformation is accelerating," Timothy explained breathlessly. "We need to know what's happening to her." Dr. Rodriguez immediately began attaching sensors to Izar's trembling form, while Dr. Vex analyzed the incoming data. The screens filled with a cascade of rapidly changing numbers and graphs. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Rodriguez murmured, her eyes darting between Izar and the readouts. "Her cellular structure is reconfiguring itself at an alarming rate." Dr. Vex's antenna quivered with excitement as he studied the results. "Fascinating. Her digestive system is adapting to process both plant matter and animal protein with equal efficiency. It's as if her body is evolving to bridge the gap between our species." A loud bang echoed through the lab as Admiral Vex and his team breached the security door. They poured into the room, weapons raised, but froze at the sight before them. Izar sat up on the table, her skin now shimmering with a faint, pulsating glow, reminiscent of Nexus's bioluminescence. Her eyes, once a deep purple, now shone with an intense, piercing light. The Admiral lowered his weapon slightly, his antenna drooping in shock. "By the ancestors," he whispered, "what have you done to her?" Timothy stepped forward, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Admiral Vex, please. What you're seeing is the result of groundbreaking research that could change everything we thought we knew about our species." As he spoke, Izar moved to stand beside him. The proximity triggered visible changes in both of them. Their skin took on a similar iridescent quality, and their breathing synchronized. Dr. Rodriguez, still monitoring their vital signs, gasped. "Their bodies! They're synchronizing on a cellular level. This level of biological compatibility is unheard of." The lab doors burst open once more as Ambassador Zorn and Marcus Steele rushed in, flanked by security personnel. They took in the scene with wide eyes, the tension in the room palpable. Izar stepped forward, her movements fluid and graceful despite the recent tremors. When she spoke, her voice carried a subtle harmonic quality that resonated through the lab. "Uncle," she addressed Admiral Vex, "what you see here is not a threat, but an opportunity. Our research has uncovered truths about our shared history that we never imagined possible." She gestured to the screens displaying her test results. "Humans and Krenim are more alike than we ever knew. This transformation I'm undergoing, it's not just changing me, it's revealing the potential for a shared future between our peoples." Admiral Vex's antenna twitched uncertainly. "But the risk—" "The only risk," Izar interrupted, her voice firm, "is in refusing to embrace change. We stand on the brink of a new era of understanding. Will you help us move forward, or will you cling to the past?" A tense silence fell over the lab as all eyes turned to the Admiral. His gaze darted between Izar, Timothy, and the other officials present. Finally, his shoulders slumped in resignation. I will stand down," he said, holstering his weapon, "but I insist on overseeing security measures for this project personally. The safety of all involved must be assured." As the tension in the room eased, a gentle tapping sound drew everyone's attention to the large observation window. Nexus had positioned itself outside, its massive eye peering into the lab. Izar approached the glass, placing her hand against its cool surface. To everyone's amazement, Nexus extended a tentacle, touching it to the other side of the glass. Dr. Vex studied the interaction intently, his antenna quivering with excitement. "The genetic markers we discovered, could Nexus be a living link to our shared ancestral past?" Timothy watched as Izar communed silently with the creature, a smile spreading across his face. The implications of their discoveries were staggering, opening up new avenues of research and collaboration. Ambassador Zorn cleared his throat, drawing attention back to the matter at hand. "I believe it's clear that this project must continue. The potential benefits for both our species, indeed for the entire Galactic Alliance, are too great to ignore." Marcus Steele nodded in agreement. "We'll need to expand the research team, bring in experts from other Alliance races. This could fast-track Earth's membership application." As plans were made and tensions settled, Timothy found himself standing beside Izar, their hands intertwined. He could feel the subtle vibrations of her newly altered physiology, a tangible reminder of the incredible journey they had embarked upon. "What happens now?" he asked softly, his eyes meeting hers. Izar's lips curved into a smile, her luminescent skin casting a soft glow between them. "Now, Timothy, we take our first steps into a future neither of us could have imagined. Together." Outside the window, Nexus's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in a rhythmic dance, a silent celebration of the new connection forged between species. As humans and Krenim alike gathered around screens to study the latest data, the atmosphere in the lab hummed with the excitement of discovery and the promise of a shared destiny among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.